Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron Larson, executive editor of Power Magazine, and you're listening to the Power Podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by Scott Corwin. Scott is the CEO of the American Public Power Association. So, Scott, thank you for joining me, and please tell a little bit about yourself, your background, and the American Public Power Association.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for having me on today. Yeah, I've been running APPA for the last 2.5 years, and before that, ran a regional version of a trade association for electric utilities out in the Northwest Public Power Association. And before that, for almost 12 years, I think I ran an organization that represented all of the electric utilities that were customers of the Bonneville Power Administration out west. Further back, I did have a background in law and in policy, worked in the U.S. Senate for a while as well. APPA, American Public Power Association, is the national trade association representing community-owned electric systems all across the country. There's 2,000 of these communities. They're located in 49 states, every state except for Hawaii, and the five U.S. territories as well. So a lot of diversity from some of the largest cities in the country to some of the smallest cities and power districts and utility districts throughout the country. Some are very rural, some are very small, and obviously some are urban centers as well. So it's been a really interesting, rewarding place to work. They're all kind of unified by the fact that they're not-for-profit electric systems owned by their customers, and in this case, in the form of local governments and districts.
For people that may be more familiar with investor-owned utilities and even maybe rural co-ops, what's the big difference between the three? I guess those are kind of the categories we fit power companies into.
Sure. Yes, and obviously there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of things it takes to run an electricity system, regardless of so how you operate and what you're operating, and the equipment and the training and the crews. As far as a business form, though, what really distinguishes public power, and even within public power, there are many iterations of this, but they are distinct in that not only are they owned by their consumers and working on a not-for-profit basis similar to the cooperatives, and so their members that are receiving that service are in the communities and they are part of the governance of the utilities. But in this case, they're also part of local governments, and they're organized like I said, some are city organized, municipally organized, others roughly follow county lines or other utility district lines. We also have joint action agencies in public power that are larger aggregators, especially of generation and transmission services for smaller and sometimes large utilities. So there's a lot of different forms within the public power family, but that's how they're distinguished from the other business models.
And what specifically drew you toward this side of the industry when you were getting into it?
Some of it was happenstance originally. I actually came out of, like I said, out of government myself, mostly federal government, the U.S. Senate, worked a little bit in state government out west. And then my first job was actually with an investor-owned utility, and my second job was with the electric co-ops. And so and then my last a couple jobs before this, I had both co-ops and public power, and in some of those instances, they call it all public power family, including the co-ops in some areas. But I really have enjoyed being on that side of it. The public service ethic is really prevailing, where you have this connection to the community and just a lot of good people to work with. Really, I really enjoy that connection to the local communities and working to solve problems that really benefit the folks back home that way.
Of course, when you look at the landscape of the power industry today, what do you see as some of the more pressing challenges that are facing your members, and how have those priorities or challenges changed since you took the job here a few years ago?
Some of the priorities and challenges have, remained consistent. I think always cost is a factor and concern, and you've seen obviously lately more talk about affordability because you really see the impact locally when you have that mixture of factors raising costs on utilities, and certainly public power sees that as well. I think some of the regulatory challenges also have been big priorities since including when I took this job. Some of these things to try to streamline policies and regulations that make it take too long to site and build and permit needed infrastructure really hits those local communities as well in many respects. Some of these systems not only run electric systems, but they run other utilities, water and sewage and broadband and things as well. But I think the thing that's really changed over the last couple years, as you might guess, is this increased focus nationally on resource adequacy, potential impacts to reliability, combined with affordability. As you see the growth occurring in some areas, and even without the growth, when you had generation coming offline, and the siting and permitting and building of generation and transmission not keeping up with the demand curve, that has been that concern was there certainly in some areas before others. Now it's pretty much across almost our entire footprint of membership. And then there's workforce issues as well that have always been there, but they become even more poignant when you are facing a lot of challenges with modernization, with growth, with the need to take on new technologies. And so the wave of retirements hasn't stopped as the population's aged, and the need to really recruit and train and retain new talent into our industry is a focus that's only increased in the last few years as well.
Since you brought up costs, I guess I'd like to continue down that path and kind of talk about the different tools or methods your members might have that they can keep rates manageable while they're still making infrastructure investments, because we know that's kind of a theme that a lot of power companies are focused on is improving systems, keeping them reliable, and still growing and building new infrastructure. So how do they manage costs under that scenario?
Well, I think they have a few tools that that most utilities try to use: good planning, good cost control, watching expenses, training and modernizations, automation. But public power specifically also has some really critical tools on how we finance some of these initiatives, and that tax exempt finance capability is really critical. Number one, and one that we have certainly advocated to make sure stays in place over the years, but it remains an important aspect. And then applied to that, there's some changes we'd like to see to clarify in Treasury rules to be able to use tax-exempt finance on some longer deals right now. The elective pay credits, that ability to use tax incentives that not-for-profit utilities had not been able to use previously. We got into law a couple years ago. Got scaled back a little bit recently, but that's also an important tool for some investments. And again, we're working on some of the regulations around those as well to make them more useful. State and federal grants, the local and being public, we have access to some grants at different levels, and certainly work with the federal government to help on the cost side for some of these investments. And then I think also just having the local control, the focus on spending, and the balance of priorities among other initiatives locally also puts a tight focus on cost control when you're having to answer to those customers showing up at your council meetings and then working with other local agencies as well to prioritize. I think also gives you some tools at the local level to try to address that balance of how do you maintain a good, reliable system and stay affordable.
One of the topics that comes up almost everywhere I go these days is data centers and the historic load growth that is expected as they bring new AI data centers online. With smaller community-owned utilities like public power, how do they evaluate these massive interconnection requests and protect ratepayers in case the actual project doesn't materialize?
Yeah, I think a lot of our members, well, some of our public power members have been working with data centers of various types for quite some time, but they have come and you do see requests in a lot of areas that had not been receiving them previously. And it's a little bit different in every area, but of course, it starts with whether there is community support for entertaining and even going down the road of analyzing the requests and looking at what the real benefits are to the community and what the impacts are to the communities. We've done some outreach and education and trainings, even now for members that haven't been receiving those much in the past to line them up with our folks who have and others who have a lot of experience on, what are the policies you want to have in place? What are the some of the contractual provisions? What are the rates look like? What are the rules for interconnection? What do you need for upfront payment and credit review? And obviously, power supply and reliability is a big set of concerns. And so we've tried to create some of these toolkits for folks to ramp up their knowledge and capability and just knowing what the steps are even before they would hire other expertise or others to really dive into the deep detail on it. And like I said, it's not for every community necessarily, but in many of our communities they've had good relationships for a long time that have been mutually beneficial as well with data centers. So it's a kind of different picture in depending upon, what the aspects of each project are.
More of a case by case basis, I guess, is
Mhm.
is how a lot of people talk about it. So
Yeah. Mhm.
when you think about public power utilities and new generation, how are your members approaching that? I'm sure renewables are top of mind in a lot of communities. They're all looking for clean energy, but where does natural gas, nuclear, storage, is there any all of the above consensus among your members?
Well, again, we've got quite a bit of diversity, geographically, politically, regulatorily across the states where public power is. And I think it's probably better to describe it as kind of an any of the above, because we certainly, across our whole footprint, have all of the above that public power systems have pursued in the past and continue to for generation. And now, and in each area, all sources don't necessarily work or are available or are economic. And so yeah, I think across that diversity of public power, you see all types, and certainly many of our members have adopted their own resource goals, and or are in states where there are policies calling for certain resources, and so we've got a lot of experience looking at that and developing most forms. When you look at some of the real newer or more future focusing forms such as small modular nuclear, and others. We have public power systems pursuing aspects of those as well. Certainly, storage and for a long history with renewables. And you've got to make sure you've got reliability and that capacity when you need it at any time, obviously, to manage the system. So you'll see right now a lot of development where you have a lot of growth with natural gas, but you see certainly folks pursuing any and all of the above moving forward.
And I think you mentioned the fact that there are challenges when it comes to permitting certain projects and things. From your perspective, how optimistic are you about there being meaningful change or reform in the permitting process?
Well, optimistic might be a little strong on the term, but I think it's such an important set of issues. It's not a new set of issues. We've seen, and it's across so much of what our industry is trying to get done, and what we and folks on a bipartisan basis, by the way, can see needs to happen and would be valuable. And even something like, on those resources you mentioned, hydropower, another great resource with the capacity and capability to follow load and to help integrate other renewables. Well, it can take just for an existing hydropower facility, over a decade and more to get relicensed. And some of these things we've known for a long time have kept us from optimizing and being able to bring online the resources that are really needed in some of these areas. And it doesn't mean setting aside environmental review. It means smart, we like to talk about smart permitting and, being able to site and build on a timeline that meets the needs of this, especially right now, very dynamic industry is really critical. So I think I do think there's a window of opportunity and best taken this year if folks can line it up. And many of these bills have the bipartisan support to move if they can get the right package together to work something through the Senate that can also then be conferenced with the House. Many of these bills have already passed the House already. So when we talk about changing the National Environmental Policy Act provisions, the Clean Water Act provisions, National Historic Preservation Act, these are pieces that have been moving along, but it's an arduous process sometimes legislatively, just like it's an arduous process regulatorily to try to get things permitted. The administration has helped in streamlining some of those processes in areas where you could do so through the regulatory process, but there's just a lot that's statutory at both the federal and the state level as well. So even if you're able to get it through federal this year, you still do obviously have in some areas some real hurdles at the state level as well.
From your perspective, how is the current federal policy environment when it's specifically talking about public power? Do you feel you've got good support in Washington?
I think we do. I think we always would like more, and we'd always like to see the support come to fruition on real action. But like I said, on some of those key issues that we've worked, like on the tax exempt finance side, on electric pay and others, we've had the support. It's trying to make sure that we can get that support into actual movement to get some of these bills passed. And I think partnerships with the Department of Energy have been an area, for example, of really good support for public power, and that they have a lot of programs that our utilities can make use of, and especially grants and agreements to get new technology on board, especially in the cybersecurity realm. And so we've worked really well in partnership with the Department of Energy to get more of those that capability, especially on cyber, out to those public power systems. And I think folks understand this local need, and that where there's local community support for some of these initiatives, that makes the federal policy realm favorable because it matters back home and folks appreciate the federal support back home.
And you mentioned, of course, the various sizes of public power utilities that are out there. You've got the small, municipals, and then you've got the large cities. I'm sure there are a lot of differences in what resources they have available to them for things like cybersecurity and maybe resilience demands. Does APPA play any sort of role in maybe sharing resources or helping some of the smaller utilities stay up to speed and meet those cybersecurity requirements, for example?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, one of the roles I just alluded to is, we'll actually be the grant applicant for the Department of Energy on getting some of those cybersecurity grants, and then we help get it distributed out to our members across the country. That can be especially helpful for smaller utilities that don't have some of those resources to be able to even to, apply and go through the process of trying to access that. We also have we have some expertise in-house that we've built on the cyber side to, assist local utilities. We'll do trainings, we'll run, exercises even. We ran a one this year that kind of combined a physical and cyber threat scenario to have public power learn from each other and handling those types of threats. We're increasing focus now on cyber mutual assistance or mutual aid, sort of like physical mutual aid you would see for physical disasters. This is the cyber version of that. It's cross industry effort. We work in cross-industry efforts as well through the Electric Sector Coordinating Council with with the co-ops and the investor-owned utilities and the federal agencies, sharing info and identifying threats that then our members can be aware of. We also encourage them to be involved with the Electricity Information Sharing and Analysis Center, operated out of NERC, that gives increased awareness as well for our members of all sizes. And then we have a cyber defense community here where we actively, it's a platform and sharing capability and have some meetings where cyber experts within our utilities can get together and share with each other. And then we just started another program. We're calling it CAP, the Cyber Accelerator Program, where we can have a sort of a cyber excellence certification to let peer reviewed and industry standards be recognized by our members, and it kind of outlines the steps they would need to go through to get that certification. So it's actually been a very active area for us in the last several years.
I can imagine several other areas where sharing amongst public power utilities could be really important, such as with the supply chain. And, we've been covering in power transformer shortages and how much lead times have increased. And of course, you already mentioned workforce issues. I can imagine sharing might be important there. Are these other things that APPA helps lead the way among the utilities to partner up and make connections for each other?
Yeah, we certainly do try to, we survey our members to see what they're seeing, for example, on supply chain challenges and in what areas. And had worked for quite a while on the transformer issues coming out of the pandemic, actually dating back to that supply chain set of challenges. It's still lingering, of course, with especially with larger transformers and other materials. And now we've got, this growth surge globally, that's putting pressure on some of the supplies in our industry. And so, yeah, we try to help where we can on that, and including on federal policies and tariff policy and other pieces that impact that. And then, we've always in emergencies and in mutual aid situations as well. We can act as a clearinghouse as well on immediate needs. But it's been a it's been a challenge, and on workforce recruitment as well. Yeah, we're trying to ramp up even more on that. We work with the Center for Energy Workforce Development, and we have our own jobs board, and do a lot of trainings and try to bring in the younger generation and get them interested. And we run a line worker rodeo, the national public power version of that, and at those events to have, a family aspect to it, get to have a lot of kids from the community around and do what we can to kind of pull in more folks into the workforce.
Well, Scott, I've got one final question for you, and I guess that is, what's the one thing that you'd most like policymakers and the public to better understand about community-owned utilities?
Well, I think many policymakers come up through state and local government, so the they see the important role that utilities have in these communities and the community buy-in and the community benefit of public power systems that are engaged with and answer to those local customers. And I think if the policymakers, don't have that background, they start to see it when our members come and talk to them, and it's mayors and council members and others come and talk to them about the local connection and the partnerships that the electric system has with the other aspects and other agencies within the community. So, with 2,000 of these communities across the country, I think one thing to keep in mind is that with all of that diversity geographically, size-wise, politically, that when APPA is able to gather them and speak with one voice on their behalf, it represents the needs of a whole lot of folks from a whole lot of different communities, but they're unified behind having reasoned policies that promote affordability and reliability of electric service to the end use customer. And being able to speak with that one voice for public power can be a powerful thing to see us working together to try to get things done. And we hope that policymakers understand that and see us as partners and as a good resource for them to reach out to for that view of what really matters for electricity in our local communities.
Well, thank you, Scott. Again, for listeners, I've been speaking with Scott Corwin, CEO of the American Public Power Association. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you feel would be important to touch on before we wrap up?
The one thing maybe we didn't cover is some of these other areas like regulation of the communications realm matter as well. It's not directly on the power supply side we talk about a lot, but our local utilities are, not only do they have to communicate with each other, and it really matters in critical situations to keep the lights on, that they have the bandwidth they need to communicate, and that not get auctioned off for other use, but having a local regulation of the poles and wires and pole attachments to those really matters as well. But that and the other one, FEMA reform, sort of like permitting reform, can be a long process in the legislative process, but it's moving along, and that could really matter as well for our local communities. They get hit with a lot of different types of disasters that impact these local systems quite a bit, and having a healthy, efficient, maybe more nimble FEMA that can reimburse and react to some of these disasters with local communities is important. So, with that, I think that's it.
Thank you again for your time. I do appreciate it, Scott.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to be with you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Power Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. It really helps others find the show. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, take care.